Your line is now unmuted.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, can you just let me know you can hear me first of all? Yes, hi Amanda, all the way from Arkansas. Excellent. Hi Amanda, that's cool. Who are there? Judy, Derek, hi guys. It's Tracy. Yes, Ness just down the road from me. Excellent. Hi, yeah. Loud and clear. That's good. Cool. Wonderful. I'll just give it one. Hi John. One more moment, just in case anybody's trying to log in, and then we will get on with it. Okay, now I'll try not to move the screen and talk at the same time, because that's when the sound breaks up. Hi Claude. So if that does happen, that's all that's going on. Okay. And again, what I'll do is as always, I'll slide the chat box out of the way in a moment while we're doing it. I shall chat away, going through this presentation for you. And then later on, we'll take a break and I'll come back for some questions. So any questions you have on the way through, just type them in the box on the left-hand side on the chat box, and we'll pick them up later on. All right. If anyone's new to it, if I answer as we go, I just end up getting distracted and going off at tangent. So it's far better for me to go through this, and we'll come back to questions later on. Great. Okay. All right. Let's just get on with it, and I'll look forward to having a chat to you with your questions a bit later on. Now and again, I'll keep an eye on the chat box just in case there's any sound problems or anyone's disappeared. But usually these things work pretty well. If for any reason the connection drops, I'll do my best to pick it up straight away. Usually it's okay, but if for any reason I go too quiet for too long, bear with me, I'm just having to reconnect. Good. Okay, I'll come back to you in a moment. Let's just get on with chatting about this, again, this lovely subject of helping children and young people. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, introduction to hypnotherapy and hypnosis for children. Right. Let's just go through a few facts and figures first of all. So it's just quite interesting to realize some of the, the amount of children going through problems. So these are some figures I just picked up earlier when I was doing some research. So, I was quite surprised. 1 in 4, 26% of young people in the UK experience suicidal thoughts. Okay, it doesn't mean they're going to commit suicide, but they have those kind of thoughts in one way, shape, or form. And Childline in the UK revealed that, in 2013, 2014, had 34,500 counselling sessions who talked about suicide. 116% increase since 2010, 2011. I put some of these figures in here to show that for some reason in recent years, these kind of things in children have been massively increasing. Among teenagers, rates of depression and anxiety have increased by 70% in the past 25 years, particularly since the mid-1980s. Right? And the number of children and young people who presented to A&E with psychiatric conditions have more than doubled since 2009. Okay. So it seems to be quite an exponential increase in children and young people really, really going through more and more things. Down to bullying. Okay, so different studies reveal different figures. It depends on the type of study and the age of the children and so on. But the minimum figure is usually around 30% of children state they've been bullied in some way at school, up to 80% if you extend it to online bullying and this kind of thing. And what's interesting is around 65% of children, when and the study was done when they were privately asked, have you been bullied? They said yes. 65% of them didn't report it. And 55% of children have been bullied at some point during childhood or school days. Typically later develop depression as adults. 55%. That's huge. And around 60% of school absenteeism is owing to fear of being bullied. There's different types of bullying we'll come on to in a moment, from not just from other children, from teachers and so on as well, But a common problem in children, 15 to 20% of children aged 5 to 6 regularly wet the bed. Okay, the figures vary slightly depending on which study you look at, but a large percentage of children, it's, still out of nappies age, kind of regularly wet the bed. And around 2 to 3% of that continues as they get older, sort of 9.5, 10, even up to age 13, 14. And a small percentage, I couldn't find an accurate figure for it, but there's different figures here and there saying it, but, a small percentage continue into adulthood, okay? And you can imagine the typical problems that go with that, fear of it happening, embarrassment, shame, impacts, and all sorts of things like sleepovers and visiting friends and staying away, all that kind of stuff, plus all the usual things of just whatever the family reaction to it is, of course. So lots of stuff that goes with that. And as around 50% of 3 to 6-year-olds experience frequent nightmares. And 20% of 6 to 12-year-olds experience frequent nightmares as well. And it's estimated that around 90% of children up to the age of 14 have at least one specific fear in general. Okay, so nightmares are a common thing, big thing. But 90% of children will say yes, they do have a specific fear. Right? And some of those fears, they do, of course. Okay, so young children up to the age 6 or 7, these tend to be more not so real, more imaginary fears, if there is such a thing, but monsters, ghosts, shadowy figures, or things they've heard about on the news. I can't tell you the number of times when I start chatting with a child or a young person, it's like, oh, I heard it on the news, and mum and dad look around like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you took that in. Okay, things they've heard on the news, and they start imagining, right, in all sorts of ways, including films and TV, that kind of stuff. When the children get to age 7 or 8 upwards, it's more based on reality. Okay, so health fears, school fears, general anxiety, social anxiety, separation anxiety, death and dying, stress, pressure, all these kind of stuff. So it switches from fantasy type things to things they can relate to more real world things. So these are common fears that children go through. These are ones I've helped people over the years and just come up again and again in different ways. Is fear of clowns. Right? It may seem strange, but not so strange when you think about it, because clowns can be quite freaky things. They're even used in horror movies. Balloons, fear of balloons banging, popping. Things in films and movies really happening. I saw this film and I'm scared it might happen. Watched a TV program, scared it might happen. That kind of thing. Things like spiders, dogs, snakes, all that kind of stuff. Sharks. Tell you about one of those in just a moment. And then things like separation stuff, or mum or dad dying or leaving. As children overhear a conversation, could be completely innocuous. Maybe it's just a stressful thing one night, but the word stuck in their head. Or if it's an ongoing situation that happens every night, whatever, then of course that has a much more greater impact on the child there. But these kind of fears there. Thunderstorms is another one. There are so many different fears and things people can go through. Something out recently was a fear of those big kind of plastic animals you see at in pub car parks now and again, where they're like the giant dinosaurs, a slide, that kind of stuff, and these freaky plastic animals in there. Someone had a big fear of one of those. So lots and lots of variations here. And again, what I want to do is teach you some principles to go through rather than specifics for every single one of these. We can teach you some principles. You can adapt these principles to focus on each of these things. Right. Great. Okay, so what can we do to help? What you're thinking tends to be, look, if the causative situation is still there, still having an influence, if someone's still being bullied, if there's still an abusive teacher or an aggressive parent in some way, then you can't tell them everything's okay, because the child's still going through it in some way. But what you can do is help the child or young person begin to express any feelings or emotions that have previously been held in, because sometimes people when they're going through this, they have to hold a lot of it in, and there's a lot of embarrassment and guilt and shame about being bullied, for example. People just don't want to talk about it. There's a reason why 65% of young people don't mention it, because they feel embarrassed or ashamed about it. So sometimes even being able to speak about it is quite amazing. And I can't tell you the number of times when a parent actually finds out about bullying when they're sat in the room having a chat with me and I'm asking questions, and then it finally comes out. It's like, oh my goodness. And the parents just look absolutely shocked. They just didn't even know. So sometimes just being able to express that is extremely, extremely beneficial. Okay. Then we can help the child build their self-esteem. Okay, so they're less likely to label themselves as a victim. How we do this, I'll come on to later on. Okay, I'll go through lots of methods and techniques a bit later on in the webinar. But helping the child, build self-esteem, their self-worth, so they begin to feel that they're okay. That what's going on around them is not about them. Okay, so if you can help a child switch that kind of perspective in some way, so it's not about them, that they're actually okay. It's just more about the people doing it, for example, in those kind of things. So little ideas like that. You can help them cope, give them courage to deal with situations. We'll go through some things on how to do that in just a moment. And possibly find a new perspective on the situation. Like I said just then, instead of seeing it, people who get bullied or picked on often think, well, what's wrong with me? What have I done? There must be something about me that they're doing that to me. When you help the person realize, actually, it's not about you. It's about something going on in the bullier or the aggressive person or whoever it is, then it can begin to change the perspective. So those kind of things can make a big difference too. Okay. What can we do to help if the causative situation is in the past or not known? And we've got a person to, again, find a new perspective on the situation or the subject of the fear. Again, I'll go through some specific examples a bit later on of this. So just being able to see things differently, think about it in a different way. Right? Or sometimes imagine different outcomes than the one they've been used to. Remember, it's all about imagination. This whole thing where people have a fear, or if the cause isn't there anymore, now they are actually imagining something. That's what creates anxiety. We imagine a fearful outcome, a negative outcome. Right? So if you can help them begin to imagine a different outcome than the one they've been used to, then they will feel different and they behave differently. Okay? If there are things from the past cause them a problem, we can help them deal with any memories or experiences that they're worried may happen again. Okay, last time I did this, this happened, so I'm imagining the same thing happening again. If you can help them deal with a memory in some way, it makes it easier then to imagine a more positive outcome. Right? Similar to adults, a lot of the same kind of principles apply, but we just do it in a slightly adapted way for children. Okay. Again, even if let's say the cause of a problem is no longer there, they still may be holding some feelings in or emotions in. So we can help them express that and go through that. If a child has switched schools and now feels happy and safe, but is struggling with some anxiety because of what happened in a previous school, then it could be useful to have them just go through and express anything they kept in from that previous thing and deal with the memory of it before you then begin to help build their self-esteem right now and focus on behaving differently and thinking and feeling differently, for example. Right? So these ideas all overlap, and as you know from working with people, you'll pick and choose different ideas and different methods that seem to fit at the time. And the more you do that, the easier it gets to do that. Okay. So building self-esteem is really important. So they're less likely to label themselves as a victim. Any of you who work with a number of clients now, you know that the clients will have patterns. It's like things happen, we believe certain things about ourselves, we believe certain things about life, and then we kind of just draw ourselves into those situations again and again and again. Okay. So anytime you can help someone unlabel themselves or set them free from that label in some way, then you set them free from the likelihood of the event or the same kind of experience happening again. Right? So there's something wrong with me as a label that many children have if they're being bullied or picked on. Okay, if you can take that label off them, they then begin to think, actually, I'm okay. And then they kind of represent themselves as being okay and far less likely to attract the bully or the aggressive type person, for example, who looks for people who are susceptible in that kind of situation. Help them cope or give them courage to deal with situations, fears and phobias and stressful things like that. You can help them feel brave inside, feel good inside. And again, in a moment, we'll go through how you do that. And again, just changing old limiting beliefs into new, more positive ones. Right? Very simple. Sometimes children they've got strange ideas that stick in their mind. and they believe it. And if you can just explain something to them, sometimes say, actually, that's not true. You've been thinking that, but actually, this is true. And then they'd go, oh, I never knew that. And then you can just reinforce the new idea, and it really, really can be that simple sometimes. Okay, so it's quite a range of things we can do there, and a number of ways we can do that. But before we get onto the practicalities of it, here are just a few general principles for working with children and young people. All right. So, okay, so age is a common question I ask. What kind of age do you help? The youngest is typically 7 or 8 years old-ish. That's just a vague, rough idea, because we need to be able to engage and capture attention. Okay. Now, I have sometimes worked with children a bit younger than that, but it's the younger the children are, the more difficult it is to hold their attention, capture their attention. Okay. So I normally think of, say, 7 or 8 years old as the minimum. But that's not a it's not to do with the child's ability to be hypnotized or use imagination. It's just how well that child can communicate with you, and you can communicate with it and gain rapport. Okay. I did have one couple turn up where one day they booked an appointment for their child, it said, and when they came in, they came in carrying a 12-month-old baby, saying, "Could you hypnotize it to sleep, please?" If I could do that, I'll probably be a millionaire by next week. I told them, sorry, I can't do that. Just here's what you need to go and do. And I just gave them a bit of parenting advice. That's all ready. But you need to be able to engage with the child in some way. Now, children and young people under 16 require an adult to be present, okay, throughout the whole treatment, unless there's a case of what's called Gillick competence. Okay, don't worry too much about the complications of this, because most of the time it all just works itself out nice and easily. But generally speaking, children under 16 need to be accompanied by an adult, all right? And usually that's advisable anyway. But Gillick competence says that if the child has displayed relevant competence, that they are able to make their own decisions and will prefer their parent or guardian to not be there or involved in the process, then that's okay, all right? So sometimes, if a child is fairly mature, especially if they're kind of 13, 14, 15 kind of thing, they may just want to be chatting to you by themselves, because it may be something they find awkward to talk to mom or dad about, or something like that. All right. So generally speaking, we say under 16, a parent needs to be there, unless we all agree it's okay for that not to be the case. All right. The Gillick competence is usually to do with the more mainstream system and dealing with mental health problems, mental health issues. But I just want to make you aware of it, so you know the legal side of it. Generally speaking, we have like an adult there throughout for children 16. We don't have to have someone there once they're 16. It doesn't mean they have to be unaccompanied, right? Because many teenagers and young adults, they like a parent to be there with them, first of all, especially for the initial chat, right? Once they get comfortable and are happy for the parent, then they're happy for the parent to step outside. So when we meet, I usually say, "Oh, you're coming in," and the mum or dad will come in and they sit down and have a chat. Once it starts to get a little bit more personal, asking some of the questions, sometimes you might see the teenager, the 14, 15, 16-year-old or 17-year-old thinking, you know what, this is getting a little bit more personal now. So at that point, we say, is it okay if your mum, dad, just waits down the corridor now? And they normally kind of nod, or something like that. But so in a way, they're kind of just checking you out, really. Do I feel safe? Can I relax with this person? Do they feel okay? And as long as you put them at ease, usually they're quite happy for mum or dad to wait outside. This is the older teenagers, generally speaking. This is something I've noticed over the years. Allowing only one parent or guardian into the session is much more productive than having both. Okay, 2 parents, 2 adults there, it just seems to overwhelm the child and make it too parent heavy. Right? So nowadays, I make it a condition of the treatment that only one parent or guardian is present. Any email inquiries, I'll express this. I say that one parent or guardian should be present throughout. If 2 turn up for the appointment, I'll say, okay, which one's coming in? You know, one can wait here. Who's coming in? And if they try and say, well, we both want to, I say, look, you know, the general guideline is just one parent is all we need because that's what works best. And most people will rather have what works best than try and insist their own way. So you can try it with both if you want to, but I think if you see the way I run a session in a moment, it'll make far more sense as to why we tend to do it that way. Good. Okay, any questions you have there, just type them in the box and I'll come back to them in just a moment. So that's a few basic principles there. Now the actual kind of the treatment itself, that's as I want to do, you know, same with adults, but I really want to get some good rapport. I mean, the last thing that I want to be is a boring old adult who the child's got to sit there and say, oh, there comes this grown-up person who's going to be all serious with them and ask them a load of questions they've probably been asked before, if they've been through any kind of repeated treatment, especially. So I just don't want to be like that at all. I need to get a connection with a child or young person that nobody else has managed to get yet. So I'm always looking for that little angle. You know, how can I get this person to open up to me in a way that they've not been able to do to anybody yet? All right. So what I do is, you know, when treating children, I will always treat the child as the most important person from the moment we meet. Okay. So when I open the door to greet them, I'll always say, hello, you must be so-and-so, to the child first of all. And then I'll speak to the mum or dad. Oh, hi, you must be mum or dad. Whatever. Okay. As if like, oh, yeah, you've come along as well. Nice of you to pop along, but actually this person is the most important one. And then what I do is I'll direct the entire conversation to the child, kind of ignoring the parent as much as possible. All right. Sometimes it's quite funny doing this, but I'll ask the questions of the child. So I'll ask kind of questions like typical things like, how did you find the building okay? We just travelled from. What's that badge on your uniform? You know, what have you got on your school bag there if they come from school? You know, is that your school? All this kind of stuff. Okay, just general chit chat. You know, and you can almost guarantee you ask the child a question and the parent will interrupt and try and answer. Okay, but I just ignore them, right? And then I respond to the child as if it's the child that's answered. Okay, I'll ask them another question and the parent will interrupt again, and I'll totally ignore them again and return to the child and keep talking to the child, and they'll keep doing it a few times, and I keep ignoring them, and pretty soon they get the idea without me needing to state it aloud. All right, the parent pretty quickly starts to shut up. Okay. Occasionally, if they don't, then I may ask them to, but usually, by the time you've done that 2 or 3 times and they've been ignored, and I just keep looking at the child or young person, they get the message and they tend to shut up. Okay. And then when we finally come in the room and sit down, I tend to lay it out in a way, something like this. Okay, so that, you know, I put the child in a seat kind of facing me with the parent nearby behind. Okay, just a little setback. Right? So the child cannot easily see the parent directly without turning around. Right? So most of their gaze is more focused on me, but to look around at mum and dad, they've actually got to twist around in the chair. Now you can experiment with this if you work with children. I can guarantee if you put it the other way, so that the parent is easily in view, every single question you ask the child to begin with, they will turn around and look at their mum or dad or guardian for some kind of answer. All right? Especially if the children are more shy or little more withdrawn. The more chatty children, it'll be easier, they'll focus on you. But most children, if you give them they will just turn to mum or dad and look for some kind of assurance of the answer. If you're going to shift the seats as I've got there, so the child is more to you, it's so much easier to keep their gaze focused with you, and they just engage with you far more. And then they can begin to tend to forget that mum or dad is still sat there. And they open up more, they just relax more, and they start talking to you rather than looking for mum or dad to answer for them. Okay. In a way, yeah, as it says here, be assured that the parent is there, but it makes it easier for the child to engage with me or with yourself rather than looking around to mum or dad for reassurance before answering. All right, so experiment with this, but I found that this kind of seating works best. Okay. So, subject to building rapport, yeah, I will rarely so rarely go straight into discussing the problem. All right. We've done the initial chit chat, walking down the room or corridor, answering the door, or bringing them in, real casual things. And we sat them down there, made them comfortable there. You sit here, mum sit there, dad sit there, whatever, if just one or the other. And then I won't say, "Oh, no, tell me about your bedwetting." Okay, I never ever do that. Or tell me about being bullied at school. Or tell me about this fear of whatever you've got. That's the best way to shut a child up, really. So instead, what I want to do is just get them talking and chatting at ease so they can relax and open up more and feel it's okay to say the things they wouldn't normally say. Okay. Again, I want them to bond with me, to have rapport with me so they can start talking, so that when I have to ask them a more personal question or a more direct question later on, they're already used to answering questions. They're already speaking. It feels much more natural. The answer will far more likely just pop out and just flow out if they've already been asking a ton of questions. Okay. So that's kind of why I tend to do it this way. So I'll just ask lots of general questions to get the child talking about themselves and their life. I need 25 minutes doing this, depending on what I need to do to get the child to relax. Okay. So it could be, what do you like at school? But also, what don't you like? Right? I don't want to be like a boring old adult saying, "No, tell me about all the serious things at school." I find it much more effective to be a bit mucking about here, a bit jokey, and asking the questions that most parents don't want to hear from their children. What don't you like about school? Who's your favorite teacher? Who's the worst teacher? What's your favorite subject? What's your worst subject? What's the most boring thing? All that kind of stuff. Give them the chance to say the things that normally a responsible adult would not tell them off for, but be a little bit disapproving of. I've just found you get far quicker rapport if you can almost kind of be on the side of the child for a while, right? Kind of come down to that level. And you adapt this to suit the age of the child, right? So you talk slightly differently to an 8 or 9-year-old than you would to a 12, 13, 14-year-old, okay? But again, same kind of principle. And if I can help them kind of laugh and joke and smile, then it just releases a lot of tension, right? Because they're going to be nervous. They're coming to talk to some strange old person about something they don't really want to think about anyway. They just want it solved and go away. But this person's going to ask some questions. So they're feeling nervous, they're feeling anxious. I just want to put them at ease, okay? So all questions like this, what do you do at break time? And I'll muck about and say, "Look, pretend your mum's not here. What do you get up to? Just pretend she's not here, Ask about friends, who lives at home, so I can find out their family situation, interests, books, TV, pets, computer games, sports, heroes, heroines, things they like to do, films they watched, anything at all, just so I can get a good understanding of what this person likes and what interests them. Are they sporty? Are they non-sporty? Are they much more rather to sit and read a book, go and kick a ball around? Do they watch a load of TV? Do they play a ton of computer games? Or they're very active? All this kind of stuff. Because all this information that you're gathering from the beginning, you can use it later on when you're doing the induction type and the treatment with them. Okay. We can use a very standard induction. I'll come to this in a moment. You can use a very pre-scripted visualization induction for a child, but it's so much nicer, as I'm always coming on about, if you can personalize things. So all this information you gather from the beginning, you just kind of store it away. And also it helps you with adapting things, right? Because, a mistake I made very recently was in the beginning, a child told me that she had a fear of tsunamis, and because I've done the same kind of visualization without thinking about it for many, many years, when we started it, I ended up having her just wandering along the beach, and it suddenly popped into my head. I thought, "Oh no, she's got a fear of tsunamis, so we better get her off the beach as quick as possible." So little things like that, you can gather information at the beginning, so you know what will work well. If someone loves the beach, loves the sea, you can use that. If they hate the sea, for example, scared in some way, you wouldn't want to take them on the beach like I did. Don't make the mistakes I did a few weeks ago. So all this information is really, really useful. Okay. Now, at some point, you want to be very casual, very fun. And the aim of that is to put them at ease, build rapport, get them talking, plus just find out if they have a superhero, just because you can use a superhero in many different ways. And I'll come on to that in just a moment, right? And a superhero could be a character from a book, from TV, from film, an imagination thing. It could be anything at all. Someone who will be like a hero figure to them, someone they look up to in some way, a hero, a heroine figure they look up to. All right. So I'm just looking for those kind of things. Just store that away in my mind when as we're talking. All right. We're having a good chat out there. And before they've opened up and given you lots of general information about themselves, then then you can start to gather information on their problem. Right? And you can try a different way if you want to, but I just found this way works best. Okay. So a nice way of transitioning from what we've been talking about to what we need to talk about is to say something like, "So, do you know why you're here today?" Right? Simple question like that. Do you know why you're here today? And sometimes they'll say yes, and we'll be able to answer. Good. In which case, you can say, "Well, should we ask mom or dad to explain for you?" Okay. And the ones who look awkward suddenly look very relieved at that moment. If you ask mom or dad to just explain, all right? And then in that moment, if they've said, yes, I want mom or dad to explain, then I turn the attention to the parent. And all the time for now, I've been focusing on the child. So we could be 20, 25, 30 minutes into a session right now, and I've barely even looked at the parent. Okay. At the corner of my eye, I'm watching them, I'm watching their reactions to see how they're responding to what the child is saying. And occasionally I might look across and smile, or if there's a good rapport between the child and the parent and myself, then we'll have a little laugh together. But nearly all my attention is purely focused on the child. Okay. So now I might listen to mum and dad and say, is it okay if you just explain, what we're doing here today? Right? So I let the parent explain or say things. And as soon as they said that, I'll go back to the child and say, look, does that make sense? Do you agree with that? Because there's no point the child having one issue in their mind, but the parent banging on about what they think it is, and there being a mismatch. So I always just check in with the child to make sure they agree. Does that make sense? Do you agree with what your mum says? Does that make sense what your dad's just said? And look for those little tiny signs. If they nod and smile or nod just quiet, that's okay. If they nod but their foot wiggles or moves, like a stamping of the foot, there's something else inside that they're not quite saying. So maybe, I agree with some of it, but I'm a bit annoyed about something they said. All right? So you might just say, are you sure? Do you agree with everything they just said? Just to double check. All right? So you really want to make sure that what the parent's saying, what the child is saying is kind of matches. All right? And as a general rule, if ever I need to speak to the parent, I always ask the child's permission first. All right? So if I've got a little question in my mind that the child said something and I'm not too sure about it, I'll say, is it okay if I ask your mum a question? And they'll go, yeah, of course. Then I'll turn to the mum and say, hi, can you just, so just said that. Does that make sense? Can you explain that for me? Or do you remember this happening before? Let the parent talk. And I say, thanks a lot. And I put my attention back to the child again. Right? So they stay the main one all the way through. If I need to ask the parent another question, I'll ask the child a question first of all. Is it okay if I ask dad another question? Is that all right? Yeah, sure. Okay. And then just chat to dad. All right. This way the child feels more like an equal. Okay. And you get this lovely rapport building up. Okay. So that's just a general way of how I tend to gather information. As they explain things and talk about things, I will use kind of clean language type questions to help me understand as clearly as possible the child's experience of the problem. Okay? Because the way an adult explains it and the way the child is actually going through it will often be extremely different. Not always, okay, but they may be very, very different. So what I really want to do is have an understanding of what it's like to be that child going through that particular situation. What are they picturing in their mind? What are they imagining? What are they feeling? Whereabouts are they feeling it in their body? If they get fear, if they get anxiety, if they get tension, where do they feel it? What's it like? How do they describe it? What kind of things make it happen? The simpler stuff you'd ask with an adult anyway, but really want to be able to tap into that child's imagination so I know exactly what they're going through. Right? And sometimes they say, I don't know. I say, that's okay. Or if you did know, what would it be like? All right? And then they quite often they'll come up with an answer. So once I have a good understanding of what the problem is, and I've got quite a bit of information to go on, then we kind of move on to the treatment process itself. Right? And there's a number of things we can do here. So the process for children is, the majority of the methods we use with adults can be adapted for children, but we obviously have to take a little more care. Okay, only really in the fact that although the child may want help, they may not be particularly enamored at being brought along and sat in front of you as a stranger and told to reveal their innermost thoughts. Right? So they may not want that. We just need to be a little bit more careful in a way. And very often the answer to their problems may be fairly obvious or glaringly obvious sometimes from the initial chat. So then it's just a case of deciding the best way to implement a solution. Right? Sometimes you won't know. Sometimes you'll have lots of information, but it still won't be quite clear. So these are the kind of things where, in my mind, if I kind of can see what the answer is, and I can see the solution, and I kind of know exactly what the child needs to start thinking and feeling now, then I'll probably use a more direct thing, like a treatment that's kind of putting an idea into the child's mind, a visualization, a suggestion, or one of those kind of things, right? If I don't yet know, if I don't have enough information, if it doesn't make perfect sense to me yet, then I'll probably do one of the slightly more analytical type approaches for children. Exactly the same way as I would for adults, okay? But we just adapt it. So if I know the answer, if they give me the answer, we'll go straight there for kind of feeding that back to them. If I don't, we might have to look a little deeper, okay? And what we do, the hypnosis side of it, I would just say, look, do exactly as you do for adults, but the younger children will have a much shorter attention span. So I tend to use a very simple relaxation and then switch over to some kind of visualization much more quickly. Right? The older the child, or it sounds strange to say it, but the older the younger person, the more you can do it as you would for an adult. Okay, but the younger, if you go on about long relaxation, their mind's going to be drifting and wandering, and they might be fidgeting around. Okay, whereas a quick little relaxation, trying to help them stay still, keep their body still, keep their hands still, and then some kind of visualization, that will be far more engaging for them, far more entrancing, right? Especially if you can bring in some of the information you've gathered from the chat at the beginning, right? So a character they like, something they're interested in. If you can somehow kind of weave that into the visualization, you'll find them getting far more engaged, and they'll become far more focused and far more entranced, okay? Sometimes they'll be quite fidgety, that's all right. Sometimes they're wiggling around and shuffling around, it's absolutely fine. And you can find children can be quite entranced, actually, and still be quite wiggly, so don't worry too much about that. Good. So let's say once we've done a good chat, once we've got a good understanding, we've got what they're thinking, feeling, and believing, once we've got some good rapport, once we've got them sitting down and in the chair in some way, once they're kind of relaxed into hypnosis, or their mind is focused in some way, then there's a whole range of things we can do depending on what the situation is, right? So something like where there's been a bullying, or the child's had to hold some feelings in some way, then expressing the unexpressed feelings can be really useful, right? So, it could be a school bully, a teacher, a parent, or someone who's said something or done something that made that child feel something, they've been holding it in some way. You can literally just do like a visualization with the child being able to say what they want to say, all right? But you do it with the superhero figure there to give them some kind of support or power or strength in some way, all right? If the child is older, say they're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 now, and the thing happened when they were younger, you can use the current version of themselves as like the grown-up version going back to the younger one, a bit like you would with an inner child type thing. But again, depending on the age, you've got to find the age right, because younger children will relate to a superhero more than a slightly older child, okay? But if you have the superhero type figure there with them, it gives them the courage, the strength to do that. Could you walk up to school bullies by yourself and say that? No. Could you do it if that superhero was there with you doing it? Oh, yeah, I could. Right? So you want that superhero or superheroine type figure to give them the courage, the strength to do that. And then you can just do a visualization where they say exactly what they want to say. And it's usually a big relief to get that out. Okay? And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes they feel relief, but there may be some of the fear. And then you can just help them just begin to let go of it. And to say, look, could you just let go of that thought now? Could you just let go of that memory? Could you just let go of the whole idea of it? Could you just let it fall away? With that superhero, your heroine figure with you, your hero figure with you, could you just set the whole thing free? Just let that idea go now. And just walk away from the whole thing and just leave it behind. Something like that, okay? So that the expressing the feelings would have a different impact depending on what the individual's experience of it was. And that could be applied to a whole range of situations. A teacher at school, a parent who's been not listening, or a parent who's absent, or a parent who would, promise to be there at the weekend but never turned up, promised to be there at the birthday, never turned up. That kind of stuff. All those things create huge feelings of, low self-worth. I'm not worth him or her turning up for, that kind of thing. They don't come to see me play at the game. Why is it everybody else in the teams there, mum and dad's there? Why is mine not there? Okay, why, all that kind of stuff. If you can get them to express this, it's usually a big relief in some way. Because it's very hard for all of us to move on in our emotional evolution if we're carrying any kind of resentment. Resentment and frustration and hurt and anger, it kind of stays there. And if you can express that or release that in some way, then we tend to evolve much more easily. Right? So even if the person doesn't really get it, even if the person doesn't actually in their mind say, oh God, I'm so sorry, actually the expression of it is still okay. Right? That's still a very important thing to do. Good. So expressing the unexpressed is a really, really good, useful thing to do when children have had to hold things in. Okay, changing old limiting beliefs for new ones by giving you information. A really simple thing that comes to mind here was a young girl who had an enormous fear of thunderstorms, would get really anxious, really, really panicky with them, and helped her. It took a few sessions to get to this one, and finally, I kind of asked her, I said, look, because the fear was of the house being blown away and destroyed. That's what she was scared of. And one of the sessions I said to her, so what do you think will happen next? Once the storm's destroyed your home, what happens next? And then she says, well, that's it. We've lost everything. So we're just alone on this hill with nothing. We're just out in the open. It's raining, and that's it. We've got nothing at all. And I said, well, what about the insurance companies? And she looked a bit confused. And I said, well, if that happens, you either go and stay with someone, or the insurance company gives you somewhere to stay for a while. And then they give you some money, and you either rebuild your old house or you buy a new one. And she looked a bit puzzled. And I said, that's how it works. And I said, you do know that, don't you? And she said, well, no, I didn't. I just thought if my house blew away, I'd never, ever have a house again. So it may sound stupidly common sense, but just explaining that to someone like that means that, well, if there's a storm and if the absolute worst thing happens, actually, we're still okay. We're still going to have somewhere to live. It's still all right. It may be a bit of hassle for a while, but it'll be okay in the end. So it was just a missing thing a little piece of information was missing in her experience of these things. And I think from when she was younger, she got scared of thunderstorms, but the imagination of being left completely homeless as a result of it is what grew and grew and grew. So we changed that, gave her some information, changed her old belief into a new belief that everything will work out okay anyway. And suddenly they just weren't quite so scary anymore, and that's all right. Okay, so sometimes there's these little bits of information missing that you just need to add it in, and it's okay, it makes a difference. Sometimes just finding out what they don't want, converting it to what they do want, and helping them focus on that is okay. All right. So for some reason, what's coming to mind is an example of a young girl going for a ballet exam. So she said, whenever I go and do the ballet exam or ballet show in some way, she gets a bit nervous and anxious, and then can't quite dance as well as she could. and she gets a little nervous, feeling her tummy, and she starts thinking about all the things that could go wrong. So then you say, all right, so what you don't want to do is focus on all the things that can go wrong and feel bad, and what you do want is to focus on things going right. So what would that be? Okay, I mean, yeah, I stay balanced and I stay flexible and I stay focused. I'm in the right place. I'm in the right part of the dance floor and I'm watching for my cues and all that kind of stuff. And it helped her just stay focused on those, and then reinforcing that idea. And sometimes that's enough. As simple as that. Same as it is for adults, really. Okay, so now imagine going for your ballet exam, and now you're taking a nice big deep breath, like I'm teaching you. You're just focusing on that feeling. We're teaching you that lovely kind of calm feeling that you can do it, feeling, just stay relaxed, feeling everything's okay, you can do it, and just enjoying it. And there's lots of love there, and everyone wants you to do well, and it's okay. And just enjoy it and do what you do every week at home or every week when you're practicing, and just do that again and again. And sometimes just taking the negative ideas, turning them into positive ones, and giving it back to them, that's enough. It makes a massive difference. Okay, so you can do that sometimes. Befriending the monkey, the library model. If you think of that library model where we have the librarian and the security guard, when children have a fear, I quite often explain this to them and go through that, and sometimes draw the picture out too and say, look, when you get nervous, when you get anxious, it's just this little monkey part of you, okay? And it's just trying to keep you safe. It's just trying to help you, protect you, that's all. It's your friend. He's just trying to say, is everything all right? What can I do to help you? So if you can befriend it in some way, then that works really, really well. And quite often people's children, I'll do that with them and say, when you think of that monkey, how is it now? And they might say, actually, I've turned into a great big gorilla who's protecting me. Right? He's on my side. So he kind of changes. And depending on how they react or how they respond to that, either, I might explain that when we're having a chat, first of all, or I might even do that hypnosis if it goes that way. Just let them decide, what they want to do with it. And you'll find that quite often that little simple model will help people find a new resource. Okay, so if I just stay relaxed and think nice things, the monkey stays in the background. Is that right? Yeah, of course it's right. Okay. But it can be on my side as well. Yeah, of course it is. It's there to protect you. Okay. So I can make it into a big gorilla. Yeah, of course it's there to protect you. Great. Excellent. Okay. And the idea of having this great big gorilla friend with them is really, really useful to some people. Okay, so you can use all sorts of visualizations in that way. Just visualization of the positive outcome they want. You can do that. Kind of mentioned that one already. That usually works if you cleared out some of the things making it difficult for them to think of the positive outcome first of all. Then you can just imagine things being different. Right? Sillyizing something works quite well. So you're making the fearful object silly by asking the child to imagine it in a ridiculous way. Sometimes this is used for, the spider phobia. You make the spider silly and put all sorts of funny things on it. The one that always comes to mind is the young, I think it was a boy I helped a few years ago now, who had a fear of sharks. But any kind of water he's in, he had a fear of sharks. Even like a swimming pool, and like a sports center swimming pool or a friend's swimming pool, because on holiday there's a swimming pool, had a fear of shark being in there. So rather than trying to convince him there's no sharks, which he kind of knew anyway, I said, look, imagine the shark there, and but this shark, he's not really there, but he's a bit stupid, this shark. So I wonder if you had a chat to him, what he'd sound like. And then this young boy started giggling and saying, oh yeah, he's got a stupid voice. It's a really high, squeaky voice or something like that. I said, yeah, what's he wearing? What's the shark wearing? Because, oh yeah, stupid hat and a silly coat and this kind of thing. And you just make it really, really silly. And the more you can get them to engage in making the whole thing silly, and especially if they can be smiling and giggling, then you find that something that used to be scary or fear-producing now is laughter-producing. And it always works best if you get the child to come up with the silly ideas. All right, so you can say, all right, he's wearing a funny, silly hat. What's the hat like? Okay, and then they'll describe the hat. And okay, got some strange shoes on. This spider's got the most ridiculous shoes. What are they? Oh, they're great big high heel stilettos, or they're great big clown shoes with spots all over them, whatever it is. Right? So just get them to use their imagination, and then any time they think of the previous object of their fear, now you say you're going to think of it in this way. Right? Anytime you think of a pool and think of the shark, you're going to think of that shark with his squeaky voice telling those jokes that really aren't funny, with those funny shoes on his flippers. And that way, especially in younger children, is a really good way of changing the fear really, really quickly. Right? And again, that's quite interactive. You do that in hypnosis or with their eyes closed, and because then they can imagine it more and more detailed. And you'll see by their body language when that is working. Right? If they're describing it, but they look quite tense, you're not getting through. So you just ask, what is it? What's going on there? What you're thinking, what you're feeling, and they'll probably tell you something else. Then you can go with that. But if they're smiling and getting into it and laughing, you've got a good result there, and it probably makes a good difference. Okay. The NLP swish technique, which we cover in one of the modules, but you can look this up as well. It's basically that you have an image in your mind of some kind of anxiety scene or fear scene, and you swish it away. You change it for a more positive one. And there's many different ways of doing that, but that can be quite useful too. All right, so a child or young person is imagining a particular scene that causes them some kind of fear, worry. It could be exams, could be school, could be a person at school, could be a life situation, could be one of these funny old dinosaur things I was talking about. And instead of having like the fear and the anxiety feeling there, you switch that around for a nice positive image. And you practice going from negative to positive, and then just clearing the mind for a moment, and then negative to positive. So they practice being able to change what they're imagining, change what they're thinking in their mind. And if you do it in quite a fun way, in quite a simple way, that can be extremely effective as well. Right? The Neil French blow-away technique is a slightly more involved one, and this is a form of regression to release old feelings and old emotions without having to speak about them. Okay. If there's some kind of fear, some kind of anxiety there, and it seems to have come from maybe something's caused this, obviously something's caused it somewhere, but you're not too sure where, and it might be quite personal, but you're not too sure what it is, then essentially you can do like a regression or an analytical session, but without the child or young person having to speak. So it's all done as like an imagination thing, but they can go through and release old feelings, release old ideas without having to tell you what it is. So that can be quite handy and quite useful. It saves a lot of embarrassment and shameful feelings. Having to express them, they can just process them themselves without having to tell anybody. All right. So this is a good method, especially if there's those kind of things: embarrassment, shame, guilt, fear, that kind of stuff that is not easy to talk about. You can take people on this little journey. And here's a few little notes on how you do this for a moment. Okay. Any questions? But I'll be with you in just a moment. Nearly at the end of the slides. Okay, so the Neil French blow-away technique is approximately you create a visualization where the child meets their superhero. All right. Again, another use of finding out some kind of superheroine in some way. All right. And then the superheroine helps them travel back in time to visit memories or events connected to certain feelings and emotions. All right. And the child then meets their younger self and gets them to blow away the feelings, but without needing to reveal the memory to you. All right. So gather up the feelings, just blow them away, just blow them away. And this is repeated for the most common feelings or emotions, or it can be tailored to what they're coming for. Right? So when I do this, and let me do a general, it's like firing arrows. There's certain common feelings, certain common emotions that we all go through at some point. So you just try a few of those without being specific as to any causes, just saying, you think of a certain feeling and see where your mind goes back to. Just go back and back and back in time. Find that little you, find that younger you. Just gather the feeling up. Just kind of blow it away. Just blow it away. All right. I'll go through this in more detail in just a moment, but you're helping to help that person Tap into some kind of feeling and just release it. Just blow it away, just blow it away. Right? And you do that just repeating it for a number of feelings, number of emotions, or specifically what they're coming for. Okay. So it might be you do fear, anxiety, guilty, feeling bad, feeling embarrassed, feeling lonely, feeling sad. And if they had some kind of separation anxiety, you might say, and that feeling, that really scary feeling, that anxiety feeling we talked about earlier, think about that one now, and let your mind go seeking, connecting, looking for that in some way. And what you do is helping them do like a regression to cause, but without having them have to express it or reveal it in any way. Tap into the feeling. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes they have a quite little mini ab reaction as they're going through it. All right? They may feel the embarrassment, they may have a little tear. All right? But they go through that and release it. So it's like an abreactive event without them having to tell you all the gory details in a way. Okay? So it can be profoundly effective for the right situation. Now afterwards, when you do an analytical thing like that, what I want to do is not have the parents suddenly start interrogating them. Okay, so if you do a blow-away type treatment where the child may be accessing very personal thoughts or memories, you don't then want the parents start interrogating them as to what they're thinking. That can defeat the whole object of it. So normally what I do is I suggest we kind of strike a deal, something like this. Right? So I'll say to the child, look, I know that while you were there back in time, so is your mum, so is your dad. And I need you to promise me that you won't ask him or her what she was thinking. All right? And in return, mum or dad will promise not to ask you what you were thinking. Is that okay? I look at the child, look at the parent, get agreement from them both. All right? And then I say, look, of course, if you want to tell and talk about it, you can. Right? But the deal is you don't ask each other. All right? And that way, the child is free to talk about anything they want to, but private still. That's okay. All right? Good. Saying all that, one of the simplest ways to help children is at some point during the initial discussion, or whilst in hypnosis, is to just ask them what they think they need in order to overcome their problem. Okay? Surprisingly simple, and their answer will often be extremely revealing and can then be incorporated into a swish, a visualization, direct suggestions, a blow away, or whatever you feel appropriate. Any of these methods I've been mentioning. If the child says, I just need to be able to do this, or I wish this, or I want to stop doing this, I need to be able to think this. That's it. Sometimes it's so simple. Okay? I need to know what happens when this. I just need to know that X. Then you can use that, right? So the child will tell you what they need to feel, what they need to believe. And you can just pick and choose from a variety of ways of them delivering that back to them, right? But I nearly always just ask them very directly, what do you think you need in order to overcome your problem? They might just say, like, I need to feel I've got someone supporting me, someone strong with me, in which case you think, that kind of superhero figure or that kind of gorilla figure, that works really well, right? So sometimes it can be really, really simple. Good. Now, another important piece of the treatment I use, whatever it is, right? Whichever of these methods I've just been skimming through with you here, I always have the parent go through it too, right? See, the last thing I want is the child being worried about feeling self-conscious. So if they open their eyes to peek, and lots of them will, I want them to see mum or dad relaxing with their eyes closed as well. If a child opens his eyes to peek and mum or dad is staring at them, that's it, the whole thing's blown. Right? If the child opens their eyes to peek for a moment, and mum or dad is there with their head down, just relaxing as well, that child will close their eyes and go back into it far more readily. Right? So much more easily. They'll relax much more. However, I don't tell the parents this before they book the appointment. Okay, I just drop it on them just as we're about to start, usually much to the child's amusement. Normally I say to the child, look, we're going to do this thing now, play a little game, a little visualization game, and we're going to get your mum or get your dad to join in as well. And I normally say to the children, look, I didn't tell them that before they came because they might not come otherwise. And the child laughs, and the parent normally laughs embarrassed and looks and thinks, well, am I serious or not? And I normally say, they think I'm joking, but I mean it. And I'll say to the parent, look, it always works far better when, mum or dad relax with it. Okay, so everything's okay. And I want you to know what it feels like, what your child is feeling as they're going through this. And then we just do both at the same time. But I'll put all my attention on the child, of course, but at the corner of my eye, I'll just be watching the adult to make sure they're relaxing and going with it. Okay. Occasionally, an adult will cheat, and they'll do the first bit, then they'll open their eyes. And if they do, I just look at them, don't say anything. I just wave my hand down as if I'm saying, just close your eyes. Just do what I'm telling you to do. Okay. So I want them to be nice and compliant, and that's that usually helps the situation enormously. Right. Good. At the end of the session, I want to make sure both child and have an understanding of what we just did, but I want to avoid too much discussion from the parent. Right? The parents typically will be trying to say, well, has it worked? Was it okay? What do you think? What happens now? What should I do now? All those questions. And then exactly what it's like as a parent, because I want to know myself, okay? But when I got a parent there with a child, I try and minimize that conversation as much as possible. All right? Try and make it all about the child still. Make sure they feel okay. Just check what we did made sense. See, make sure they're smiling or looking relaxed in some way. If the parent is still going on, I say, look, I'll send you a message later. We can have a chat later. Okay, but right now, I just want to leave things as they are and let it go. Okay. As I said, if I use the blow away, then I may do the strike a deal thing at the end of it. All right. And then really it's just a shake hands to say goodbye, and I may just say a few reinforcing yes and person just as they're about to leave. All right. So anything we spoke about before, anything that's come up, anything that needed turning around to a positive, I may just say just as they're leaving, and just remember that X, whatever it is. Okay. You can now begin to think like this. You can feel this. You can remember that funny image of that sharky person with the squeaky voice and the funny hat. You can think of that spider with the big clogs and smoking a pipe and carrying a handbag or whatever it is. Okay, so those kind of things. And you can feel, safer now when you go to school because everything's okay now. You can remember that people do like you now, and you're a very likable person. Right? And it wasn't about you, and you're okay. So I just look them in the eyes, I'm shaking their hands, and just remind them of some of those core ideas. And I always do some kind of positive suggestion, saying, look, you're okay. You're a good person. Doesn't mean you got to be good. You just are a good person, and that's okay. And you are enough. Okay, you are enough. Something like that. So these nice, general, positive ideas there. And then we see what happens. Okay. Let them go away for a parent or so, or maybe I've already arranged a follow-up session a week or so later, right? But any follow-up sessions, I just kind of repeat what we did before, but a more condensed version of the chat. All right. So how's it been? How you been feeling? Usually, there's been some kind of benefit, some kind of change. Occasionally, there isn't, in which case we missed the mark first time around. But most of the time, there's some kind of change, some kind of benefit, some way. And then it's just a case of reinforcing that, repeating things that worked well, and fine-tuning any things that's remaining. Okay. So it may be, let's say, a child who was having trouble getting to sleep and couldn't go to sleep unless mum or dad was in the room or right nearby. Maybe 5 nights out of the 7 they managed to do it, but a couple they started getting anxious again. All right. So something had changed, but it hadn't quite gone away completely. They might say, yeah, I've stopped thinking about the shadowy monsters under the bed. I've stopped thinking about this. It's so much easier to go to sleep now. But that thing I read on the news last week about the burglars in the area, I keep imagining a burglar coming in through my window. All right. So it could be something like that. You then may have to take care of the next layer, the next level. And whatever they say, just you have to step into that world. So if they say, I saw the TV program with the aliens coming, and I think the aliens are coming into my bedroom at night. If you say, don't be ridiculous, then that's it. You've blown it, okay? But if you can then step into their imagination, okay, say, what would you need to know? What would you need to feel? What would you need to believe or know in order to feel safe? What would you need to happen in order to be able to go to sleep at night? And they may say something like, well, to know that the aliens can't find me, don't know where I live, that I'm protected in some way. And that if they did come, then they turn into something silly. So you let the child come up with the answer in that way, all right? But always operate within their imagination, within their system. That's the most effective way to do that. And all these different ideas and methods, you can overlap and dip into them as you go. But I would tend to just choose one or two first of all, get used to it, and then maybe try another one, and then start merging them together once you've got a bit of experience there. But you can try this on adults too, all right? That blow away technique, I only ever used it on children, and then James on my 2013 training course, he said he used it on adults and they liked it. Great. So I'd never done that before. So you can use that with adults too. Works very well, and a few of the others have been using it in that way as well since. So, many children's problems can be eased or resolved using these methods, and can be adapted for any age range, even up to adult. All right. You just slightly adapt the language, the tone, how you phrase it, and how you deliver it too. Okay. Obviously, you would deliver the language to a young child, a 7, 8, 9-year-old, slightly different than you would to a 14, 15-year-old. Right? Just change the tone, the same way you would if you're reading a childhood story. Good. So, that's a approach working with children. Let me pause there for a moment. That's been going an hour non-stop pretty much. Let me see any questions. Okay, let's come over here. Great. Cool. Okay. Hi everyone. Any questions there? Let's just go through this. Questions? Everyone still there? I assume you're still there. Must have covered everything. Right. That's great. I was worried then for a moment. I thought, oh no, I've been talking to myself for an hour. That's good. Still here? Great. Excellent. That's goodness. All right. Fab. Martin, have you had situations that really didn't want to be there? Yep. Yeah, that happens. If it's a younger child, I'll normally kind of say, look, I know it must be boring for you talking about this kind of stuff. I know you probably don't want to be here. I know you'd much rather be playing football or watching TV or playing a computer game, but if you can just bear with me for a moment, I'll see if I can do to help you. Is that all right? So I'll try and get them on side in some way. Okay. And if it's a teen who's been like, the parent says, you need some help, go and see this person, and they're not really up for it, I'll just say to them, look, do you want to be here? Do you really want to be here? And they might just smile or go, well, not really. And I say, that's okay. Look, if you don't want to be here, it's absolutely fine. But do you mind if I just ask a few questions? Just see if there's anything I can give you to take away. And they'll probably go, yeah, sure. All right. And then I'll just see if I can get some kind of rapport from them. Something like that. All right. Very, very occasionally, they just won't want to do anything. But it's very good. Some degree of having to want to some kind of help in some way. I can normally get good rapport, and we start doing something. Good. Have you ever dealt with children with attention deficit disorder? I have. What comes to mind is it's hard to keep their attention. I know that's the part of the problem. That's the tricky bit, right? I can't think of any real clear, definite examples of immediate positive outcomes, or of it not working actually. But I'm racking my brains to think of examples. I know I have, but I can't think of examples coming to mind there really. What I'm thinking as I'm thinking that is because I think sometimes people get misdiagnosed with this whole attention deficit disorder, and sometimes there may be a genuine disorder, and sometimes it's just because the child's needs are not being met in some way. That's the actual answer that is coming to my mind at the moment. So I tend to try not to focus on the label and the statementing, which is what it's called sometimes. And just think, well, what does this person need some help with? What can I do to help them there? So I tend to look at it in that way, really. I can't think of a lot of examples of that, John, to be honest, but I know I have. So that's a vague answer. Okay. Mary says, I keep having to help children that have got parents are divorcing disorder. Yeah, that's it. I'm sure you've done this, Mary, but one of the most common things you need to help the child understand is it's not about them. Okay? It's not about them. Yeah, children can be angry, upset, hurt. And one of the worst things is, when the parents, they think they're trying to help the children by saying, well, we want to help you. Who do you want to go with? Do you want to live with mum or dad? That for some children, that's just a horrific choice to have to make. Sometimes the situation doesn't involve that, but if the children are asked to have to make that decision, that there's so much guilt involved with that. So there's all that kind of stuff. When the parents think they're trying to do the right thing, but the children really go through all sorts of horrific trauma because of that. So yeah, angry kids, getting them to express it. What do you feel? What is it you want to say? What do you really feel like saying? There's lots of hurt there, upset. Just helping them express it all. How would you like it to be? That kind of stuff. Does that make sense, Mary? Yeah. Cool. Good. Any other questions? What I was going to do is go through the blow-away thing if I was short of time tonight, as in the presentation was short, I was going to go through that. But what I might do, I might just record that as a separate thing. So it takes a good 20, 25 minutes to go through that. So I'll record that as a treatment in itself. And I'll put that in the members area as a completely separate thing. I think it's a bit late to do it right now. But I'll do that for you. So you know what it feels like. Then you can go through it yourself. Right? Because it's just a listening thing. You haven't got to interact in any way. Lovely. Any other questions from anybody right now? Take the information we're giving you there. Have a listen a second time. Make sure it sinks in, and just use your own personality in your own way to bond with kids, with children, young people. I just find that the more I can think at their level when I'm with them, the more rapport I get, and the more they open up. And the more they open up, the more information you get, the more you can get more to the core of the problem, and the more they're willing to listen when you start talking then. And that, however you choose to deliver some kind of solution back to them, they'll be far more receptive to it. And then you just see what happens and try and fine-tune it again the next time, if you need to. But very often you can get miraculous results in just 1 or 2 sessions with these kind of things with children. Lovely. Okay, if there's no more questions for now, I shall let you all get on. And any questions you have after this, just post them in the Facebook group. We can have a chat about it. And any experiences you have of practicing with children, again, just share it. Things that go well, things that don't, because we learn from the failures as we do from successes. So please never worry about things that go wrong. And let us know. Good. Thanks, everybody. You're welcome. And we'll be back in touch in about a month's time for the next one. Okay, everybody, I'll talk soon. Take care. Bye.